My name is Susan Hutson. I am the independent police monitor for the city of New Orleans, and I'm the president of the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, also known
Uh,
as NACO. Well, our job is to provide oversight for the New Orleans Police Department. And so one of the things we do is we look over their accountability systems, which include their complaint intake, investigation, and discipline system. We also look at how they investigate major uses of force, which could include an officer firing his or her weapon, um, or some other type of action against somebody whom they're trying to take into custody. And if that person ends up getting injured or killed or major injuries or something, we monitor those investigations. And we look over, we can look over any type of investigation into any incident. So if an officer just tackles somebody, but they don't get hurt, we can still look into that. But if they shoot somebody and kill somebody, we definitely watch over and monitor those as well. Then we also look at their policies and procedures, their training, supervision, information. Look at how they lead and manage and hold folks accountable. We do. It is a big job, and we do have a team. Right now, there are 7 of us total, including me.
okay.
And there are around 1,200 officers. So, that helps a lot. I could always use more folks to look at all aspects of policing, but that helps a lot. So I have a number of people are lawyers. So my 2 deputies, one looks over the complaint intake and discipline system, and she's experienced in employment law because this is a field of employment law. And she was a former public defender, so she knows the criminal elements as well. So knows when officers are making a proper arrest, whether or not what they do is constitutional. My other deputy is a former prosecutor, and she looks over use of force. So she looks over in custody deaths when officers fire their weapons. So of course, as a prosecutor, she knows a lot about the law and criminal issues and constitutionality. So they're a good 1-2 punch. I have a young lawyer who takes complaints. I have a office manager who handles all the work. I have an office assistant who looks at catalogs, lawsuits, and claims for damages, and looks at appeals for discipline. So it collects a lot of data for us. And then we have a mediation director. So we have a mediation program, and it's a pretty interesting one. If a member of the community files a complaint against an officer, sometimes, depending on what type of complaint it is, it can be mediated. And then that will come to our office, and our office then conducts mediations. We have a team of community mediators who sit in between the officer and the community member and kind of work out solutions. So we have a lot of stuff that we do. It's very enjoyable work. I have to say, it's not really a job. It's more of just really a mission. The New Orleans Police Department takes around 850 or so complaints per year.
Okay.
So that's about, as you can see, that's less than 1 per officer per year. Our office can take complaints as well, and we take about 1/8 of those complaints. We take about 100 complaints ourselves, which is a big amount for such a small office. Those cases go to the New Orleans Police Department for investigation. We don't investigate them, but we can monitor the investigation and provide feedback on them. This is my 3rd city in which I've conducted oversight. So I was in Los Angeles at the Los Angeles Police Department, which is a
Okay.
big office. And before that, I was in Austin, Texas at with the Austin's Police Monitor's office. So we looked at the Austin Police Department. And so when I was in LA, this job came open, and I went to law school in New Orleans. I went to Tulane Law. So I had a connection to the city. I saw they were headed into a consent decree. I saw they were headed into reform, and I was doing the exact same things in Los Angeles. So I said, you know what? It gets me closer to home, which is Houston as well. So, and I'm a Southern girl at heart, so went ahead and applied for it and ended up getting it. And that's what brought me here to New Orleans, which was in need of a major reforms for its police department. At the time I got here in 2010, the New Orleans Police Department was considered one of the worst police departments in the country. Yeah, so the United States Congress passed in 1994, I believe, as a part of the Omnibus Crime Act. Um, on one hand, they kind of ushered in the incarceration decades that we've had with
Right.
that, but the other part of it was empowering the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division to conduct investigations of local police departments to see if they were policing constitutionally. And if that they found during those investigations that the police departments were not policing constitutionally and had a history of civil rights violations, then the Department of Justice could sue the city in federal court. And most of the time, when the Department of Justice sues a city, they work out an agreement, and that's the consent decree. It's an agreed to court order in which a federal judge then provides oversight of that city and that police department. And in the consent decree, it lists, usually in paragraphs, um, all the methods for reform for that police department. So it'll look at supervision, which is really important. It'll look at constitutionality of arrests. It'll look at racial profiling. It'll look at the use of force or violence against community. It'll look at accountability systems like I do to see whether or not they're holding officers accountable for their actions, and that they're training them well and looking at any issues. So that's what consent decrees are. They are agreed to court orders for reform. They can vary from decree to decree, but I've always seen them be usually start off in the 4 to 5 year range. Depending on the size of the police department, though, that they almost never meet that 4 to 5 year criteria. So in LAPD, I think it started off in the 4 to 5 year range. It was 9 years before they ended most of the consent decree, and then there were still some parts that had to be worked on. Here, the consent decree was actually went into effect in August of 2013. So as you can see, we're 7 years in,
Yeah.
and the department still has not yet complied with all of the paragraphs for reform, but it's getting close. It's getting close. Yeah, so civilian oversight can take many forms. There can be police monitors like our office. So we're part of civilian oversight. We're not police officers. Nobody in my office is a former police officer or a police officer at all. We're all civilians. And then it could take the place of civilian review boards or police commissions, or it could be auditors. Sometimes they're called police auditors. Sometimes they're called inspectors general. Sometimes they're called civilian review panels, investigative boards. They can take a number of different forms. Some of the major ones are police monitors or auditors, and those are folks who monitor, but then also audit closed cases and closed investigations to see if there are patterns in the police department's accountability systems for change, right? Is there something that need to be reformed or changed?
Right.
You have civilian review boards or commissions that generally are civilians, people in the community who sit on these boards, a lot of times as volunteers. And sometimes they can be the head of the police department, like in Los Angeles and in Oakland. And in some places they're not, they just are advisory, but they give feedback to the police department from the community. They take input from their community. Sometimes they are these oversight can take the form of investigative bodies, like in New York City and in Chicago, the COPA, civilian. I'm not going to be able to have it too much. So they but that again has that office has investigatory powers. They can even investigate shootings, so they can investigate criminal matters as well. So that's a major, very strong level of oversight. And you have others, like we don't have investigatory powers here, so and it runs the gamut from the country. So there are probably around 160, between 160 and 170 offices around the country, usually
Okay.
in larger cities. But our national association has received calls all since George Floyd. Just the phone is rang off the hook. Many cities want it. Well, by the time all is said and done, we think we'll be close to 200 or 300 offices by the time we, help folks put it together. But It's growing because people are saying, look, we have to do something. We have to get control here. Um, Policing is one of the places where we normally just let the police decide what is expected, what are the standards, what do they do. And now the community is saying, nope, that's not going to work. We need to have more control over this. It needs to be more community led. So, and we have to make change. And I think a lot of people think that after George Floyd, this is the time. This is the time to make the change, to make real lasting change. I mean, I'll just say one more thing. There's some studies coming out that show that strong oversight of the police actually lessens racial profiling. It lessens officer involved shootings, and it lessens the number of times that officers are killed as well. So it's really win-win for the community when there's strong oversight. So that's what our national association is trying to do: uplift offices to make them stronger, have more powers. A lot of times they're very weak or just volunteer or don't have resources or employees. And so, that's doomed to fail. Anything that it does not have the proper resources will. Civilian oversight can be a lightning rod at times. So I'll talk about it from that perspective and a couple of others. And so, you have police unions, which can be very powerful.
Right.
And civilian oversight is trying to be created and to get started and to thrive and to do strong work. And you have unions who push back against that. And they're able to push back in a way that they can get laws passed in each state. So if you look around the 50 states, there are 50 different types of laws about what oversight can or can't do. And though there are limits on the amount of information that can be given out to the community about policing, all of those laws are starting to change right now because we're finding out that when you have all this secrecy and lack of transparency and no real discussions, you can't have change. And then we'll be back here doing these same things over and over again. So those are some of those cause frictions in cities between police, their unions, oversight, the community. There can definitely be conflict. One of the things I like to do is have coalitions where we all talk about it. Everybody has kind of their own kind of perspective on it. There are people who would want more policing in their neighborhoods. We hear from them too. We have people who want less policing or more fair policing. There are victims of crime and survivors of crime who said, I'm not getting good police services. We want the criminal justice system itself to reform better. So it opens up a whole can of worms. You got sometimes community, you know, kind of pointing fingers at each other, but it really opens up really important conversations. Yeah, it was a little journey. And the great thing about being a lawyer is you can pick so many different areas of the law. This is now my really third. I started off out of law school in just general practice. So I did a little criminal law, a little family, a little probate, all those different contracts, a little bit of everything. And I hated it. So I was like, oh boy, I took out all these laws for this. And then I left from there and I went to be a prosecutor.
Okay.
And I realized that I was not made out for prosecution either. So, but that was a very eye-opening experience, gave me some trial experience and a lot of criminal experience, constitutional experience. And then I went from that to being an assistant city attorney handling employment matters. So I used to look over internal affairs investigations and HR investigations into the conduct of city employees, including police officers, to see if they would be disciplined or fired. So that's where I got into how you investigate the police and how you hold them accountable. And then I left from there and went to the city of Austin, and that started me on the police monitor kind of oversight path. But as a young lawyer, as a defense lawyer, I saw officers doing all kinds of things that were outrageous. I thought they were lying on the stand at times. As a young lawyer, I didn't really know what to do with that. And I didn't see the prosecutor doing anything with it. And I remember times trying to get to a police officer's record and not being allowed to. Judges wouldn't allow that. They wouldn't allow anything that would even remotely impugn the integrity of an officer. I'm like, I'm just trying to get information first. I haven't even called them anything. So I saw how the system protected itself a lot and didn't really know how to fight that because I have a client who needs a result. and I'm trying to get the best result for my client, as I'm, my loyalty is to my client. So that was eye opening for me. And then I became a prosecutor. And I'll never forget one time a really experienced detective got caught lying on the stand by a defense attorney in a trial I was in. And I was stunned because I really was like, I thought this guy was just like the real deal. But for him to get caught like that, telling a really blatant lie, was really another eye opener for me. But there was no oversight mechanism in that city to hold these officers accountable. And so it was kind of like, okay, what goes on here? As a prosecutor, what am I trying to do? I'm trying to help a victim now. So what do I do here? I'm trying to prosecute a case. So once I got into this area of oversight and learned about it, it was just very eye-opening for me, and it suited me.
Right.
I found out a few years ago, my paternal grandfather was killed by the police in East Texas.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 70 years ago, and there was no accountability. And they did some of the similar things that happen right now, which is assassinate the character of the person who was killed and blame it on them as well. And so I was just like, wow, 70 years ago, and it's some of the same things are still happening today. So that just really confirmed for me that this was the area for me. So like I said, I just don't feel like this is a job. This is a passion. It's a mission. I was just talking to a young lawyer about that today in her early 30s, and she's kind of like, I don't know about where I'm at right now. I'm like, well, the good thing is that this is just one segment of your career, and
Mhm.
you can take this your experience here and go do a myriad of things. So I always do feel good about having chosen law. Well, yeah. First of all, I would just want to say that, you know, so many people are engaged in the conversation now, from, all that run the spectrum. You've got abolish on this end, and
Mhm.
you've got, we need more police on this end, right? And we need to just, let police do what they need to do, kind of status quo or even more. And then you have a lot of folks in between as well who are going, hey, look, this has to change. We can't be back here again. We've been through this a number of times. Michael Brown, Eric Garner, Philando Castile, so on and so forth. We keep going through these things, and when are we going to get some true reform? Something has to change. And so I think George Floyd's death opened that wide open. People saw for their own eyes that he was handcuffed, he was on the ground, he was not, he couldn't do anything to them. And still he was basically murdered. And so they saw then that, okay, wow, what's going on here? We do have to make some changes. The word defund is so charged. I think former President Obama mentioned that last week,
Mhm.
and it is. And the word defund, I've talked to some people and heard the word defund, and boy, it's like their head spins.
Yeah.
It really is charged, but it's moving the ball forward. Because if you think about 4 years ago, and I'm not trying to get into politics too much, but things that Bernie Sanders brought up 4 years ago, and I'm not a Bernie Sanders person or anything, things that he brought up, I didn't even understand what he was trying to say. Fast
Right.
forward to 2020, everybody's talking about that now, right? So he moved the ball forward from what was considered a very extreme position to something that is very mainstream now. It took education.
Mhm.
We need to look at history. We needed to look at, patterns and oppression, and all those things people know more about now. Same thing I think is going to happen with policing. And we are going to move across the spectrum to where, have abolitionists who's like, we don't need police to do anything.
Right.
I'm not quite there. Not from, I'm a wannabe abolitionist, I'll say that. But having been a prosecutor, right, and having seen the things that people do to each other, having been a defense attorney defending some of these folks that have done some of these things, you know that there are people out there who don't follow rules, who do not respect other people's right to live or to be safe. And so I just don't know how we're going to deal with those folks yet. And so I'm listening to more, but I'm learning everything I can. And what I encourage people to do is deep dives into history. Read the new Jim Crow. During this time period, we've had time to read the new
Yeah.
Jim Crow. I read that. White Fragility. I've read Stamp. I've read
Mhm.
listening. Was recently listening to some '60s rhetoric and 70s rhetoric, during that civil rights movement. It's the exact same as today. I mean, and so they
Yeah.
really were laying it out back then. So we've lost some of that. But one thing I want to bring to all police officers is the true history of policing. Because what they say is, oh, that has nothing to do with us. That happened a long time ago. No, no. These structures are still in place, and understand
Mhm.
that and don't fall into that. So um, I think that the word defund has been good for starting a conversation and moving this ball forward, and really getting this discussion and learning that we do have to have less policing. We don't need policing of the mentally ill. We don't need policing of children most of the time. Those just aren't necessary. And if you look at a list of 911 calls, I think somebody said between 1 and 4% of those are for violent crime. Some of it is just not policing work. So we can really uh, build up those institutions that help people. Look, I'd love a citywide mediation. One thing I told the chief here, if we had a citywide mediation program that was free, we could mediate beefs between people on the street in the community. That's a whole lot less 911 calls.
Yeah.
We have a project going on to limit the amount of policing of children. Kids need something else. We know that especially traumatized children need something else. Same thing with mentally ill. Police, they're all on board. Like, we're not trying to do that. We want to get the bad guys, so to speak. So I think if we just look at the things we can agree about, the ways we need to lessen policing, that's a good start. So, but what we are we are in contact with a lot of the other mediation services around the city. You have some traditional mediation services, like in cases. You have folks who do restorative justice practices with children. You have folks who do community circles where they're trying to heal relations in communities,
Mhm.
um, deal with racism, etc. So there are a lot of just really good projects out there, and if we could kind of catalog what we need and funding for this
Pick
and make
one.
that be a priority,
Yeah.
man, we could free people, police up to do the hard work. COVID was great for long distance learning. So we had to pivot. Normally every summer or early fall we have an annual conference. And
Mhm.
at that and anybody can come to the conference, but mostly it's our members, people who want to learn more about civilian oversight, and they can come and they can learn about. We have three types of curriculum. One for kind of newbies in police oversight. This is how you get started. This is how you build up your resources. This is what you look for. This is what you do. We have a curriculum for more experienced police oversight practitioners, and we have a track for oversight of jails and prisons, which is
Okay.
becoming a larger section of what we do. And so you can come learn a lot about that. Well, this year we had that all virtually, and it's available on our website at nacol.org, and it's still available to the community right now. You can go in and look at the individual sessions. So for instance, there's some sessions about community engagement,
Mhm.
or there are sessions about protests and dealing with those, and what should the police be doing, what should oversight be doing. There's um, there were sessions about trauma. How do you deal with trauma, both in the police and in the community? So you can go through and just look at just a lot of really good information there. You can pick and choose one or two that you want to look at, or the whole package. And that's
Mhm.
all going to be available until February, I believe, of 2021.
Okay.
We're not going to leave it too long because we're going to bring fresh curriculum in, but that is available on our website for folks to go look at and just to get an idea about what police oversight is about. Now, NACOL also provides technical assistance to cities who are building oversight. So right now, around the country, probably about 10 cities we're working on trying to help them put together oversight. So we talk to community, elected officials, government, police, whomever, and to give
Mhm.
them some idea about what we do. And very soon we're going to release a report that we wrote. We got funding from the Department of Justice to look at what makes strong oversight work. And so
Mhm.
it's called Principles and Effective Practices in Oversight. So look for that on our website soon. Folks will be able to look at if you want to create it in your own city, you can get some information there, and then certainly reach out to us, and we're glad to help.